on, or you got to go pick this up and you got to get it delivered, he needed to replace that crew, which brings us to the one question everybody always has: what's a crimp? And no, it's not a Barbra Streisand hairdo from the late 80s. You do? So the most famous crimp in our fair city, wasn't the one I was going to talk about, was Mrs. Piggins. Mrs. Piggins had a bar on the Jackson Street Pier at Davis Street, approximately. Mrs. Piggins would be hired by a captain of a ship who needed a crew to replace that crew at about $30 to $50 a head. A fair amount. Pretty good. So the captain would come to Mrs. Piggins, among others. This wasn't something that was strictly a San Francisco gig. This happened in all port cities. Yep. So they would contact Mrs. Piggins and say, we need 4 crew members to get the ship back to China. I need 4. So a young man would sit on a certain bar stool in Mrs. Piggins' establishment, and she would say, oh, here's a drink on the house. It's a special... Are you recording this?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Bit of local hospitality.
You so hard, you're what? Wow.
Yeah. It's such a nice day.
Yeah, it's Christmas. Hello. Not on Christmas. Don't ruin Christmas. What movie is that from? Divine? No Divine fans here?
Right here.
What movie is it from?
That I don't
She
know.
wants the cha-cha heels.
But I'm from Baltimore.
Oh, yeah, I love Divine. So anyway, Mrs. Piggins would give him a special drink. The recipe's in the library. She would use 5 liquors. She didn't care. Just 5. But she added 1 extra ingredient. It was called laudanum. Does anybody know what laudanum is? It's an opiate. So she would put laudanum in the drink. Our friend would slump onto the bar. Now, this was a special bar stool that Mrs. Piggins had. That bar stool would pop open, and she was up on a pier, and underneath that trap door was a boat, a little rowboat, and one of her employees. And when they had gathered the right number of people, they would take that boat out to the ship that she was hired by, and they would upload those men onto the ship. They would come to 12, 14 hours later, out in the middle of the Pacific, wondering what the heck happened. So those captains paid Mrs. Piggins and others, Shanghai Joe, $30 to $50 a head. Those men didn't get off free. They had to pay back that $30 to $50 before they were allowed to get off the ship again. But they were out in the middle of the Pacific. So if you drop down maybe 8, 10 feet down into a boat and you're all, what might happen to you?
Breaking legs.
Might break some things. So if you got out in the Pacific and you came to and you had a busted arm, what would they do to you? They threw you overboard. If you were dead, they'd throw you overboard, and then they go back to Mrs. Piggins and say, you only gave us 3. Mrs. Piggins was great. We're going to get to Shanghai. Don't worry. We'll get there. Let's walk up. Come on.